The loud pitter-patter of the rain's seemingly eternal onslaught is audible on the roof. Inside, the creaking, cobwebbed hallways are adorned with old paintings, whose subjects glare at you as you pass them as if they have a secret to tell. An ancient secret, awoken by accident but now all-consuming. It is the Covenant family's curse. It is unreal, unstoppable, undying. Clive Barker is a man whose name you may recognize. There was a time when his name was as ubiquitous in the horror genre as Stephen King, who was quoted as calling Barker the future of the genre at the time, and whose name above any property, be it a book or film, his most well-known being Hellraiser, meant you were in for a heaping helping of body horror, alternate dimensions, and sexually fueled nightmares. One might say I enjoy Clive Barker's approach. One would of course be making a serious understatement. Ever since I got scolded in preschool for making a crayon drawing of the scary needle-headed man I saw in the Blockbuster movie aisle that I wasn't supposed to look at, and later in my middle school years discovered Aberrat, Barker's insanely artful and beautiful stab at young adult fantasy, you might say I've been hooked on Barker's work my whole life. That hook, of course, being a rusty meat hook dripping with blood in an attic. But did you know that Clive Barker was one of the earliest big-name proponents of games as art, and dipped his toe into the medium as an exercise in applying his style of storytelling and subject matter to a different and newly evolving medium? You'd be forgiven if you didn't, as the later of his two forays into the medium was panned and forgotten, and his first was, well, just forgotten. But it was critically acclaimed, and quite good, if not imperfect and uneven at times. I'm talking about Clive Barker's Undying, a horror first-person shooter in which Irish debunker of the supernatural Patrick Galloway travels to the spooky estate of his old war buddy who saved his life once, Jeremiah Covenant, to return the favor. Covenant is plagued by the ghosts of his dead family members, all of whom on one fateful night in their youth while playing around with one of Daddy's occult tomes, summoned forth the spirit of an ancient evil at an altar of standing stones that still haunts the premises and inches ever closer to destroying our reality. You know, that old story? It's kind of like finding your dad's stash of pornography, but instead of finding a crusty laser disc of Debbie Does Dallas and possibly needing future therapy sessions, you unleash a creature from one of H.P. Lovecraft's wet dreams. The gameplay involves using your left hand for the shooting of firearms and the right for spellcasting, making it an unsung prototype for future games like BioShock and my pet favorite, Dishonored. The weapons are increasingly interesting devices of destruction, and the spells are all fun, if not underutilized at times. You find yourself with some spells you use only once to solve a puzzle, and then forget you even have, and ultimately end up with more than you know what to do with. But the abilities that stand out are memorable. Scry is an ability that lets you see the unseen, forcing portraits of the Covenant family members on the walls to reveal their true nature. There's also spells that resurrect fallen enemies to fight for you, and my favorite, a projectile of floating, cackling, exploding skulls. Sorry to kill your family members, Mort from Planescape, but it's for a good cause. If you thought the Resident Evil 7 family was the creepiest dysfunctional family in game history, you should meet the Covenants. Each family member is well fleshed out, and their descents into madness well cataloged in the in-game journals you can read. Barker himself even voices Ambrose Covenant, the black sheep of the family, who in his portraits looks like a young Nick Cave, but whose monstrous form resembles a scrapped character from Grabbed by the Ghoulies. Each chapter of the game has you facing off against one of them on their own turf and terms, save for one section where you face off against your rival, Otto Kiesinger, which feels out of place and unrelated ultimately to the Covenant family drama central to the plot, but which takes place in a perfectly Barker-esque magical realm called Oniros, which despite its narrative disconnect is the coolest environment in the game next to the amazing atmospheric Covenant estate. The game runs on the Unreal Engine and the graphics are dated, but the feeling I get wandering the halls of the Covenant Manor is one I love to revisit again and again, even if it means stopping the game before its final wackadoo chapter inside Bethany Covenant's odd tribal realm of Eternal Autumn that seems to go on forever and just isn't as much fun as the rest of the game. Some of the puzzle solutions are also ridiculously obscure as well. You'll find yourself getting lost a lot, but the ambition of the level design shines through any flaws. Barker took tried and true gothic horror cliches and utilized them perfectly here. The developer of the game originally wanted a more Duke Nukem-esque buff, badass protagonist named Magnus Wolfram, but Barker suggested Galloway as the main character instead, and was quoted as saying, he wanted to play as someone that he would want to sleep with. Well, I'm glad they made the change. I'd like to take a moment to touch on one part of the game that is one of my favorite subjects, and that any Clive Barker work would be incomplete without. Monsters. The Howlers are the minions of Lisbeth Covenant. These are dog-like abominations that jump around and deliver fast slashes at your face. Scarrows are like miniature Cthulhu slugs that shoot acid at your face and obscure your vision. Sure, you fight your share of walking skeletons and evil ghost monks as well, but I think my favorite creature in the game are the Sill-Lith inhabitants. Small crow-like creatures wrapped in bandages and quivering, letting out their awful screeches. If one of them catches you in its sonic blast, the game utilizes a very cool disorienting effect. Your aiming crosshair, which usually just stays still in the middle of the screen during most FPSs, warps in and out of focus. You feel like you're gonna throw up. It's a really cool effect, and I found myself from time to time purposely falling under their spell just so I could experience it. There's also the Virago, weird tentacled robed creatures that float around, repeating the same sound file over and over again in a way only an early 2000s PC game character can. But it's a creepy effect, and their blasts kill you in very few hits. I found these guys honestly unnerving while playing the game with headphones on. The myriad of beasties present in this game are nothing to shake a scythe at, and I enjoyed every single one of them. The ending ends on a cliffhanger that will never be paid off, and the final boss is a grotesque monstrosity, the likes of which I normally love, but whose anatomy is about as decipherable as two Michael Bay Transformers fighting in a hailstorm. Overall, flaws and all, it's the atmosphere that wins out here, and maybe it's my bias given that I love the subject matter and the author behind all the game's madness, but I consider Undying a game worth playing at least once. It's from a time when horror games were more than just jump scares, ripe for YouTube reaction views, and when Barker was a name to be reckoned with in the genre. I hope that day comes back, personally. I hope it comes back like an angry spirit from an ancient tomb on a path of destruction. Even as I write this, the rain pitter-patters on the roof above me. No wind is howling, but a fire burns in my heart. A fire to spread the word about actual good, interesting horror. And that box of smut VHS I found in my dad's garage.